one of the things that we've been working on is I need sure. So Gigi asked me to explain the question about the DNA.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are two kinds of DNA that we have found genealogically useful. And I've run a project for 15 years. And I put Jewish DNA, people around the world. I have 2,500 people in my project. And traditionally, until 3 or 4 years ago, the only thing we could compare was the Y chromosome, which is passed on from father to son, or the mitochondrial DNA, which was passed on to mother to the child through the women. So, for example, you and Gigi should have the same mitochondrial DNA because you both descend through women in the Strauss family, and because Gizzy and Margaret and Charlotte were sisters.
Right.
All their children, and if they have daughters or grandchildren, will share the mitochondrial DNA. On the same side, males will pass on through the Y chromosome, which only they carry, a signature which goes back 10, 15, 30,000 years. And we can actually now, up to 150 years, we can now measure it quite with fine tuning. So what we were talking about before, and the reason why we weren't able to do these breakthroughs until recently, was genealogically speaking, we couldn't do any DNA tests beyond the Y chromosome or mitochondria until about the last 3 or 4 years. There was no 23andMe. And there was no ancestry. So we had very limited to go on because we had no Strausses in this family to test. Bo was the last male Strauss.
And why wouldn't Michael be?
Because Michael passes through a sister, through a daughter. And Gizzy did not have a Y chromosome. So let me just finish this little talk, Lisa, and we'll get back to that. So we had no direct lineal connection of a Strauss. So we don't have anyone in the family that we can match to Joe Strauss or Mark Strauss directly. So but within the last 3 or 4 years, the new techniques, the new technology allows you to cross genders. And they don't study the Y chromosome, they don't study the mitochondrial, which the women carry, which all people carry, but it's passed through the egg. We can now look at all 46 chromosomes and make statistical analyses to see how closely people are related. It's not, and we know with great certainty whether someone's a parent or a child or an uncle or a cousin. When it gets to 3rd and 4th cousins, it's a bit of an art. It's not entirely a science. So what happened here was that Mark and Joseph combined the strength of a Y chromosome, where you could have been relatives in the last 2,000 years based on the Y chromosome alone. It was the combination of the Y chromosome and the mitochondria and the autosomal DNA, which allows it to make all these connections. So the reason we've been able to find all these cousins around the world is they're not Strausses, but we know that they descend from Strausses, and we've been able to use the autosomal DNA. And we have now probably about a half dozen samples of Strauss family members. And every single time we test it, the hypothesis is you're a Strauss, you're part of our Strauss family. Every single time we've tested it, it turned out to be our hypotheses have been correct. So what you've heard today is a discussion of Mark's first-hand family history, oral history, Joseph's oral history, our oral history, all combined and proven by using technology. And then, of course, you have the photographs, and we share photographs of the same people. And Mark has the photographs of the apothecary.
Yeah. But the most amazing thing between Mark and I is anecdotal. Anecdotal. We both share, Mark knows about it, he can tell you more about it, Adam knows about it. I'm starting to get quite involved in that. We both share a subset of a DNA group.
All of the male Strausses come from this E1A1.
E1A1 subset.
Which is
turns out to be E1A1. When they told me your father came from Africa, I said, what? E1A1 turns out to be, I have E1A1, he has E1A1. If you go to Mali and you find Dogon herdsmen people who are herdsmen around the lake, 50% of Dogons have E1A1.
And you actually...
We actually come from that area. From that area.
Wait, can you explain that more?
I have an explanation for that too.
Yes.
Can you explain that more? What area?
Yes, we know everything. Maybe
area again, Joseph.
What area is this?
It's Mali.
Mali.
Which is where?
Timbuktu.
Mali is in Africa. And Dogon subset, if you're going to have Dogon people, right near the lake, they are herdsmen, check it out. They have 50%
It's a trading area. And
Well, are they white? Are they not
I'm
white?
going to tell you. Now I'm going to tell you.
Tell
I
us.
started-
How many years?
Because I have very black hair, and I've been wondering
I
about
tell
this.
you.
We're
You
going
should
back,
know
we're
about
going back
that.
5,000 years.
So I tell you. So I tell you how it goes about it. So Mark says, what we're going to tell the rabbi? Well, it's very simple. It's really simple. We have exploration.
Oh, yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
know.
we have. When Jews were wandering in the desert sometime, some of the Jews lost the way. And they didn't end up in the promised land. They ended up in a doggone area.
I mean, this was a big training area. We were
Yeah,
training.
they did not end
So
up.
they weren't so smart, those
No,
Strauss.
no,
I have a question. I
They
have a
weren't
question.
called Strauss.
Really?
I have a question.
Well, that's true, right?
Oh, wait, you didn't answer that question, though. Are they black or are they white?
No, they are black,
We
but
have
they
black- we have
have
black cousins.
they have customs. If you go to Ireland now, they have customs totally unrelated and unknown to anybody else in the area. They know anything about the stars and astronomy and the moons and stuff historically, and other people around that nobody knows. Nobody knows how do they know that.
What sort of customs?
What is that?
What are the customs that are so unusual?
They are some unusual custom knowing about the stars and the sun and the moon, which these people around there they don't know. And they ask him, what do they know, right?
So how many generations ago was this? I'm sorry, they said one more.
5,000 years and more.
5,000 years ago?
Okay, I have a question which is also for Adam, the three of you. We know intellectually why this is a fascinating process. I want to know, and I'll preface this by saying I asked my mother, why do you want to have this gathering? And she said, for me, it's kind of the last hurrah. My sisters are gone, and for me, this is sort of like the last hurrah with my family. But I want to know from an emotional point of view, why is this important to you?
That's an important thing. But I tell you,
Yeah.
Mark is totally different.
Yes.
I grew up, I have no relatives. Zero. I only had one uncle, Ari Bachi, who was not married, who died in 59, he came to visit. My father, every time I would talk to him, he would say, it's incredible, the whole total family is gone. And you are the one, I tell you, you are the one who remains Strauss. My father would say. Because I'll tell you another story in a second about that. From my mother's side, also there was only one brother left in Israel. So we grew up in the village, no relatives. Not in the village, in the whole world, believing except Ali Bachino. And Hannah named he would send us, right? We knew. So how important it is suddenly discover that if my father were alive, and today he could speak Sharika in Hungarian, and he could speak Julie's, I found out my father's uncle, that means my grandfather's brother, he just passed away in 77 in Florida, Louis. I just found out from the papers.
Yeah.
If my father knew about it, he was first time in Canada, 74. He would do anything just to visit his uncle. So from my position, my children, when I tell this to my children, and my wife says, why are you suddenly interested? Well, I'm not really. It just comes on its own because I never really knew that my grandfather had 8 siblings. I knew my father had 5 siblings. I knew they all died. And you know, when you grew up in a little village and they called you little Kishito, Bidashito, you know, I don't want to translate you what it meant.
Not translate.
We knew, we grew up and it was just like I'm gonna tell you, in 53, 54, when we had to go to school, it was communism, right? And Jewish holidays came and who goes to school, who doesn't go to school, right? And we had a lady who served at concentration camp, Yole Dani. She had a number, and she would call the ladies in, and they would say, who goes to school, who doesn't go to school? And the lady, she was the elder of the ladies, and the head of the Communist Party was a Jewish guy. Again, he was a Jewish guy. So she would go and talk to him, and she would come, okay, Monday you go to school, Tuesday, but all you bring medical certificates, you know? And we had to survive like that. And we never complained, it wasn't anti-Semitic, it was just normal. I was the first bar mitzvah in the village, you know, like first bar mitzvah. Like my father says, I knew nothing when I knew nothing. So it's just, you want to be interested to continue, simple as that.
Since the war.
Since the war, after the
So
war,
continuity
after the
after,
war.
yeah.
So,
I mean, in
my
my,
wife, it's like a discovery I never planned.
in my case, we thought that there were no more in my family, other than the ones, my grandfather's children's kids, and who were Strausses. As a matter of fact, in my immediate family, my brother is here and my sister. Everybody else is, we have one son and one daughter. I have actually the only Strauss son in my immediate family. I wanted, in our family, we took a blended name for our kids, Medallia Strauss, but I wanted to make sure that my son had Strauss as his surname because he's the last Strauss. I didn't think there were other Strauss.
There you go,
So-
disappointed you.
So now I can take on a blended name again.
What about you, like, emotionally, I mean, not intellectually, emotionally, why is it meaning?
Well, emotionally, I have a son and daughter who are Strausses, right? And I've always felt it was important they had some understanding of the architecture of their past. You know, one of the things I've learned over the years is that a lot of what comprised me, things I learned from my own parents, were unsaid things they learned from their parents. And I've watched Sherry, and I knew the three sisters well enough to be able to pinpoint pretty precisely what was going on with Gizzy. And the more I learned about Gizzy, the more I learned about my wife. And so I think it's a very important thing for our children to understand that there's an unspoken past that's part of the upbringing process.
What about for you? Because I know you're passionate about it yourself, aside from your kids, what is it?
Well, I have an overarching field, which is I'm very committed to the unity of the Jewish people and the restoration of the Jewish people after the Shoah. Israel is
Mom, he's in the middle of talking about it.
Israel has been an opportunity for people who returned to our land to reestablish their Jewish heritage and create a new Jewish future. We don't have that luxury here in the United States or Canada, where we have a place we can go to where we're all suddenly instantly Jewish members of the Jewish people. So it's a harder task for those of us who live in the exile to be able to recreate that sense of Klal Yisrael. So I think part of my emotional experience in running a project where I've been able to identify with absolute 100% certainty that all Ashkenazi Jews are very closely related to them.
That's for sure.
I mean, it's actually interesting to